What do you do when your own brother has stolen every woman you ever loved, and the one woman he finally cannot charm turns out to be his therapist? My brother stole every woman I ever brought home. Not dramatically. Not obviously. Just quietly, systematically, at every family holiday for almost a decade, until I stopped bringing anyone at all. My name is Nolan. I am 33 years old. And I want to be precise about this before I explain it, because there is a version of this story where I sound paranoid. Where I sound like a man who could not keep a relationship and needed someone to blame. I have heard that version. My own family told it. My brother's name is Callum. 3 years younger. Dark hair, sharp jaw, the kind of easy smile that makes strangers trust him in about 4 seconds. The kind of man who could walk into a room in a wrinkled shirt and still have every woman leaning toward him like he was the only light in the building. He knows it. He has known it since we were teenagers. The first time it happened, I was 24. Her name was Haley, 4 months in. I brought her to Thanksgiving. By the end of the night, I caught them alone on the back porch, Callum with that focused look on his face. When they saw me, he just smiled and said he was telling Haley how lucky I was to have her. 3 weeks later, she said she needed space. 2 months after that, she was in his Instagram photos. His arm around her at a rooftop bar downtown. That was the pattern, Ronita, the teacher. Callum spent 30 minutes telling her about his mentoring program for at-risk kids. They exchanged numbers. I found out they had been texting for weeks. Joelle, the accountant. Callum asked her to review paperwork for a business he was starting. I was not invited. When I asked Joelle about it, she said I was being insecure. Talia, Daniela, Naomi, every single one. The worst part was my family's response. My mother said Callum was just friendly. My aunt said I should not bring women around if I could not keep them interested. My grandmother told me to carry myself with more confidence. I stopped bringing dates entirely. I told my family I was focusing on my career. The truth was I was still dating. I just refused to give Callum any more ammunition. Then I turned 32 and met Priscilla, a trauma surgeon. Sharp, funny, kind, the kind of person who walked into a hospital and made everyone calmer. 8 months in, the most stable relationship I had ever had. I sat her down and explained the whole history. I told her Callum would try something. I needed her to stay close, she laughed. Nolan, I run a trauma bay. I am not going to get swept off my feet by your little brother at a Christmas party. Christmas Eve arrived. Callum was already there in a perfectly tailored jacket, sleeves pushed up, looking like a cologne advertisement. He saw Priscilla and his eyes lit up like he had just won something. Priscilla stayed by my side all evening, kept her hand on my arm, made a point of saying us. I started to relax, but Callum was patient. He always was. He spent the whole night circling until he found the opening. A question about a friend who had collapsed at a gym. Medical questions, very serious. Priscilla hesitated, glanced at me, and then followed him to the kitchen where it was quieter. 15 minutes. When they came back, she looked flushed, and Callum looked very pleased with himself. We broke up in February. She said the hours were too much for a relationship. I saw her at a restaurant in March with someone else. Tall guy in a suit. Not Callum, but it might as well have been. I was done. I stopped dating. I stopped going to family events. I carried the anger around like a stone in my chest until my doctor told me my blood pressure was creeping up, and I needed to do something with it. That is how I found the Saturday morning trail running group. That is how I met Sloane. She was a few years older than me, quiet, with this calm, steady way of talking that made you feel like she was actually listening. We ran the same pace, so we ran together, and somewhere between mile 2 and mile 5, you end up telling a near stranger things you would not tell your own family. She was a therapist. Private practice. She ran on Saturdays to clear out everything she had absorbed all week. She never talked about her clients, hardline. I respected it. We ran together once a week, then got coffee after, then texted during the week. Sloane was funny in a dry, quiet way. She remembered small things, that I hated the cold, that I always ordered the same thing at the coffee place and pretended to consider the menu anyway. Nobody had paid attention to me like that in years. Maybe ever. After a few months, I told her about Callum, about Haley on the back porch, about Priscilla in the kitchen, about the way my own mother looked at me like I was the problem. Sloane did not tell me to be more confident or just ignore him. She let me talk until I ran out of words. Then she said, "Your brother sounds like someone who only feels powerful when he is taking something from somebody else. That is not about you. That is about whatever hole he is trying to fill. And it is a hole you will never be able to fill for him no matter how much he takes." Something about the simplicity of it cracked something open in me. I noticed she went very still for a second when I said his name. I noticed she changed the subject a little too smoothly, but I did not think anything of it. I figured she was just being careful the way she was careful about everything. 8 months of running together. Then one Saturday, sitting on the tailgate of her car with 2 coffees going cold between us, she said she needed to be honest. that she had liked me for a while, that if I did not feel the same way, nothing had to change. I kissed her before she finished the sentence. She was different from anyone I had ever been with. She said what she meant. She could tell when I was anxious before I said a word. It was like having someone actually see me for the first time in my life. When Thanksgiving came, my mother called asking if I was coming. I had been avoiding her calls for almost a year. I told Sloan about it that evening. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Take me." I told her it was a bad idea. I told her Callum would eat her alive. I told her he had ended every relationship I had ever brought around him. She just looked at me with that steady expression. I have spent my whole career sitting across from people who are very good at performing. I think I can handle your brother. I said yes. What was the worst that could happen? Thanksgiving morning. I gave her one last warning in the driveway. She took my hand. "Nolan, I am not going anywhere. I promise." Callum was already there in a slim charcoal Henley, that watch, hair perfect. He walked over the moment he saw her. "You must be Sloan. I am Callum, the better-looking brother." He launched into his routine. Questions about her work. Leaning in when she talked. Little excuses to touch her elbow. Finding the detail that made her light up. Everything he always did. But something was off. Sloan was not playing along. She answered in short, even sentences and let the silence sit there. Callum cannot stand silence, so he kept filling it, talking more and more, working harder and harder. When he suggested she come see my father's wine cellar, just the two of them, she said she thought I would love to see it too, and kept her hand in mine. He was getting frustrated. This was not how it went. Usually by this point, the woman would be flushed and laughing and finding reasons to be near him. Sloan was watching him the way you watch a weather pattern. Calm, unbothered, a little amused. At dinner, he told stories designed to make himself sound generous and deep. The mentoring program, the charity run, the time he talked a stranger through a hard night. He mentioned his pilot license twice. He laughed loudly at his own jokes and looked around the table to make sure everyone had caught them. Sloan was polite. She nodded. She talked to my grandmother about her garden and asked my uncle about his years on the railroad. When Callum tried to steer the conversation back to himself, she would answer in one sentence and turn back to whoever she had actually been talking to. So he kept getting handed the spotlight and watching it slide off him. I had never seen anyone do that to Callum. After dinner, he cornered her by the bar cart. I watched from across the room, heart pounding. This was where it always happened. I saw him lean close, hand on the wall beside her, all charm and teeth. He said something low in her ear. Sloan did not lean away. She looked him dead in the eye and said something back. Just a few words. I watched the color drain out of my brother's face. I watched Callum, who had never lost his composure in front of me in his entire life, take a step back like he had touched a hot stove. He set his drink down. He walked out of the room and did not come back for almost an hour. My mother leaned over and whispered, "What did you do to your brother? He looks like he saw a ghost." We left 20 minutes later. In the car, I asked Sloan what she had said. She was quiet for a long time. "Nolan, I need to tell you something and I need you to let me get all the way through it before you say anything." My stomach dropped. "Your brother is my client." Or he was. "He has been coming to my office for about a year and a half." She kept going before I could speak. "I did not know when we met. You never told me his name those first few months. Even when you did, Callum is not the rarest name. But a few months in, you described him. The watch, the mentoring program, the exact way he works a room. And I knew. The man who had been hurting you for years was sitting across from me every Tuesday at 4 o'clock. And I could not tell you anything. Not one word. Because that was his, not mine to give away." She exhaled. "The day I was certain, I ended our professional relationship. I told him I could no longer be his therapist for reasons I could not disclose, and transferred him to a colleague I trust. I documented everything. The date, the reason, the referral. I talked it through with my clinical supervisor, so there was a record. And I did not let myself feel anything real about you until that was completely finished and clean." She looked at me. "That is why it took me so long to say something on that tailgate. I was waiting until I knew there was no overlap. Until I knew I was not crossing a line. I would never cross that line." I asked what she had said to him at the bar cart. He did not recognize me at first. Different last name than the one on my office door. Hair down. Months had passed. He had been working on me all night, and at the bar cart he leaned in and told me I was wasted on you. That you were the quiet, boring brother. That I should give him my number and find out what I was missing. She paused, and I looked at him and said very quietly, "Callum, it is Dr. Hale. Tuesdays at 4. I think we both know that is enough." I started laughing. Not happy laughing. More like something that had been clenched in my chest for 10 years finally letting go. That should have been the end of it. It was not. A week later, my mother called. Callum had told everyone I had brought his own therapist to Thanksgiving as a cruel setup. that I had known and orchestrated the whole thing to humiliate him, that Sloan had broken the law, that he was going to file a complaint with the licensing board and end her career. My cousin Cora met me at a coffee shop in January. She held her tea without drinking it. He printed things out. He has a folder. He showed Grandma Lorraine. He is not bluffing, Nolan. He called me at midnight to read me the complaint he was drafting and ask if it sounded believable. She wiped her eyes. Believable. Not true. Believable. I called Sloan from the parking lot. She was quiet. Then she said, I figured this was coming. People like your brother do not get embarrassed and walk away. They burn the house down. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. Thick, organized, tabbed. When I realized who he was, I documented every step. The exact date I terminated his care. The referral to my colleague who can confirm he became her client. My note to my clinical supervisor timestamped. There was no overlap. None. The timeline is airtight and it is all in writing. Then she opened her phone, and there is this. A text from Callum's number. Sent the night of Thanksgiving before it clicked for him who she was. Callum can't stop thinking about you. Nolan never has to know. You felt it too. And 20 minutes later, when it had clearly clicked, delete that. Forget tonight happened. He is going to walk into a licensing board, Sloan said, and swear under penalty of perjury that I pursued him. And then they are going to see a message from his own phone propositioning a woman he had just been introduced to as his brother's girlfriend. And then trying to bury it. He is not the victim in his own evidence. He is the aggressor in writing. I called a family meeting. Told my mother I wanted everyone there that Sunday, Callum included, because there were things that needed to be said with everyone present. They agreed. I think part of them wanted the show. Callum was on the couch when we arrived, already wearing his wounded expression, holding court like a king. I hope you are here to apologize, he said, for what you and that woman did to me. I did not raise my voice. Callum says Sloan broke the law. He says she was his therapist and my girlfriend at the same time. He has told all of you that. Some of you believe it. So let us look at what actually happened. With dates, one by one, I laid it out. The date she terminated his care. The months that passed before anything started between us. The fact that she never told me a single thing about his sessions. The fact that I did not know he was her client until we were driving home from Thanksgiving. The woman you have all decided was a predator did the single most ethical thing a person in her position could do. She walked away from a client the moment she identified a conflict. Quietly. At a cost to herself. With no audience. Callum's confidence was cracking at the edges. He glanced at our mother. The old look. The one that had gotten him out of everything since he was 6 years old. That is a lie. She has been manipulating this whole family. You all know how he is. A few heads nodded out of habit. I took out my phone. Callum. On the night of Thanksgiving, what did you text Sloan? The room went still. I never had her number. I read it aloud. Callum can't stop thinking about you. Nolan never has to know. You felt it too. Then the second one. Delete that. Forget tonight happened. I let it sit in the silence. The same silence Sloan had used on him at the party. And I watched my brother drown in it. My mother said his name. Just his name. Nothing else. He started talking fast, the way he always did when cornered. It was out of context. He had been drinking. I had put her up to it. It did not land. For the first time in 30 years, the charm did not work. Because everyone in that room had just heard, in his own words, the man who had spent a decade claiming victimhood, propositioning his brother's girlfriend and then trying to make her disappear. My grandmother, who had defended Callum his entire life, who had told me to carry myself with more confidence, looked at him and said very quietly, "You sent that." He had no answer. My father stood up and walked out of the room. My aunt would not look at him. My cousin Cora was crying, and Callum sat in the middle of the couch with his whole family finally seeing him clearly for the very first time. I stood up. If you file that complaint, the board is going to see exactly what everyone in this room just saw. So go ahead. File it. I took Sloan's hand and we walked out. Behind me, I could hear my brother saying my name. The way a person calls out when they have just realized the floor is gone. For the first time in my entire life, I did not turn around. That is the whole story. That is exactly as complicated and exactly as simple as it is.